Well, good morning. Sure good to be together. We are in week 2 of a 3-week study of the book of Esther. Today I want to talk a little bit about, if you will, like what are the odds and kind of the idea behind it. If you go to the end of the book of Esther, you will see that the Israelite people experience an amazing military victory over their enemies, which doesn't seem, if you will, like all that odd until you appreciate the circumstances that they are in. Earlier, they have been judged by God, found guilty for turning against him, so they've been taken captive. They have been divided among 127 provinces. And it really isn't, like, if you will, like a great set of circumstances where you would go, oh yeah, they would definitely win a military victory, because they have basically nothing in their favor. And so if you would ask somebody, like, what are the odds that they would win this thing? Probably not very good, and yet they do. And if you ask yourself, like, well, how did that come about? That, if you will, is the rest of the book of Esther. How all these things come into play, all these things work out, that the Israelites can experience this amazing victory when defeat was staring them right in the face. And that's really what we're looking at in this series. And it's the idea of how God works in amazing ways that we often don't see. When Southeast Christian did this series, it was like In the Shadows, I believe is how they titled it. And it really is just a fascinating way to kind of look at the book of Esther and what God is doing. When we talk about the idea of odds, and really they say when you're trying to do things like this, like over the radio, over the internet, you should never talk about numbers, because it's just hard for people to think about and to envision, and they just kind of glass over and you lose them. And I don't really want to do that, but I want to talk a little bit about the idea of numbers. Maybe some of you play the lottery. I know on occasion it gets pretty high, and people who don't usually play get involved. They say the odds of winning the lottery are 1 in 290,472,336. And reality is, odds aren't very good that you are going to win the lottery. What are the odds that our universe exists? I mean, what I mean by that is not so much the universe, but like our Earth here in this place, where it's a habitable planet, where we live and kind of thrive as a people. Like, what are the odds that that's going to occur? Long time ago, people felt like they were probably, like, we learned about the universe, like technology was letting us see and understand more. There are probably like lots of little Earths scattered all over the vastness of our universe. And what I mean by that is just places where it was like people could go there. If you could fly there, we could inhabit that planet, and everything would just be great, because all the conditions are right for us. We thought there'd just be millions of those little planets because the universe is so big. The more they've studied the universe, they're like, really the odds that we even exist are not very good. Physicists have shown that even small changes in the constants, like what allows our planet to exist, the strength of gravity, electromagnetic force, cosmological circumstances, make the universe basically an inhospitable place, Science America says. Lee Solomon estimates the odds of a life-compatible constants appearing by chance at about 1 in 10 to the 229th power. Which is kind of a big number. On Sunday at church, I actually did a slide where it has that as an actual number. And so if you're listening to this and you're bored, make a 10 and then start 229 zeros behind it. If you can't sleep tonight, try that. Maybe it'll help you to drift off to sleep. Anyhow, when you look at that number, like, that's the odds that this planet could exist. And it goes on to say, basically, it's zero. That we are, as a planet, even exist in a habitable zone where people are, is just unbelievable odds. If I would ask you, what are the odds that you exist? What are the odds that you are here? And I would be honest with you, I don't even think about that. It's like, hey, mom and dad, I have like 2 brothers and a sister. I don't think that much about the odds of me existing. I exist. I'm, pretty fortunate. The odds that any one person exists, 1 in 10, followed by 2,685,000 zeros. I didn't do a slide for that. I'm not sure if I would even be done now trying to make 2 million and some odd zeros after a 10. It's just astronomical, the odds that we are here, because you have to factor in, for you to be here, there had to be grandma and grandpa, great grandma and grandpa, and on the line goes. And it just becomes this number that is absolutely crazy to even think about. What are the odds of any one event occurring? Well, they use little statistics like that: probability factor, favorability of the outcome, total possible outcomes, number of trials that are there, and you arrive at this thing about the odds that something could occur. What are the odds that the Israelites could win this amazing battle that occurs, if you will, at the end of the book of Esther? Again, the Israelite people have been taken captive, dispersed among 127 provinces, and so they can't be a military because they can't really communicate, they can't combine forces, all these things. And the odds that they would ever succeed would be astronomical, and yet they do. And how does that all come about? If you will, it is God working in the shadows. It is God doing things that when we look at them, we are like, that is completely impossible. And yet, if you will, that is kind of what God has always majored in. Doing amazing things, if you will, impossible things. Esther chapter 9, verse 1 and 2 kind of give a little glimpse at the story. It says, on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. The people around them could kill every Israelite. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. But now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in the cities and in all the provinces of King Xerxes and attacked those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them, because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. What are the odds that they would experience such a tremendous victory? Well, if you were to sit down and try to pen and paper that out, it's probably 1 to 10 to, at least a few zeros. And yet that's the arena in which, God routinely works. That he does things that, from our perspective, seem almost impossible, if you will. It is God moving in the shadows. And we looked last week at how that process, if you will, kind of begins with things that just from our perspective seem completely random and unrelated. But God uses them to bring about, if you will, amazing things. Xerxes has this big party, lasts 180 days, followed by a party that lasts 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, he's drank too much alcohol, so he calls for his wife, Vashti, to come in just to be shown off before everybody about her amazing beauty, and she refuses to come. Well, the king apparently isn't used to being told no, and so he asks all of these men, well, what do we do when somebody says no to the king? And so they decide, we can't put up with this, and so we're going to send an edict throughout all the land that women are not allowed to tell their husband no to anything they say or request. And so that's the law that goes out, and Vashti is no longer queen. And so now the king wants a queen, and so a beauty contest unfolds, which Esther wins. And again, it all seems like just a super random, unrelated things. And yet, for Israel to know this victory of chapter 9, all these things have to be occurring for that to happen. And if you will, God is in the background just orchestrating all of this. And I think that'll be one of the kind of cool things about heaven, if you will. That God is just in the background working things out that we never realized. And we'll get to heaven and it's like, we will have no idea all the things that God has done. A friend of ours, he was in the military, and he reflected back about his time in service. And he could think of like 13 times where he was like, I really should have been dead. but I'm alive, made it through every one of those. And he was just kind of like, I just feel like God was watching over me. And I'd never thought about life like that at all. Really never did. But when I thought about it, I'm kind of like, I'll bet his number 13 is way too low. I'll bet when we get to heaven, we we will marvel at all the ways God watched over, guarded, and protected us in ways that we never even knew happened. And if you will, it is God moving in the shadows. And God is going to continue to do that, and that's kind of what we are looking at in our time together today. In the book of Esther, chapter 3, it says, after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman. He was I don't even know how to say that word, the Agite, elevating him and giving him a seat of high honor, that of all the other nobles. And after all the other officials in the king's gate knelt to pay him honor to Haman. For the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down and pay him honor. And so again, this man gets elevated to this high position by the king. And one of the things that's going to go along with that is when he passes by, everybody is supposed to bow down and honor him. And again, it seems like this completely random part of the story. And yet it's not, because it's going to be pivotal to what's going to happen at the end. And so you're kind of like connecting the dots to see how this works. Included in that is Esther's relative. And when this man passes by, everybody kneels down, but he will not. He refuses to bow down and to honor him. And I would guess in part he does that because of his religious allegiance. You know, thou shalt have no other gods before me was something that any Jew would have been routinely taught. That was part of the teaching that they would have learned. And of course, some of that is what has got them in trouble and dispersed out among these people. And so if they're going to get back in God's graces, they need to start exalting him and lifting him up and following his laws and his ways so that God will hear their prayers and restore them as a people. And so here's his effort, if you will, to get back to honoring God and putting him where God really is supposed to be. And so he refuses to bow down. And of course, word gets back to Haman that this man Mordecai is not bowing down to him. And so he inquires about it. Who is this person, who won't bow down and worship me? And so they look into it and find out his name and find out that he is a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay honor to him, he was enraged. He was angry that Mordecai would not follow the king's edict and bow down to worship him. But Mordecai is following a very different king. He is following the Lord. And yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of only killing Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Okay, Mordecai or Haman, place of prominence, pass by, everybody, hail, Mordecai won't do it because he's going to honor God, is my guess, is the reason why he refuses to do it. And he might have thought, I might get in some trouble for this, but hey, I'm gonna stand for what I know is right. I'm going to do that, only to have it maybe get bigger than he thought it was going to, and it is. So Haman goes to the king, and he says, this is your rule, right? They bow down and worship me. This man, he won't bow down and worship me. I don't like it. And the thing is, he's a Jew. And so I want to annihilate not just him, but every Jew that there is. And so it says, the couriers went out, spurred by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. And so the king has made this edict, and they're now going to, on this certain day, every Jew is going to be killed in the entire region, in all 127 provinces. They are fair game to anybody to kill them. And I'm pretty sure in my mind that Mordecai was like, all I was doing was like honoring God by not bowing down to somebody. You are the one true living God, and I'm not going to bow and worship any other God. And yet what he was doing now is going to begin to affect all other kinds of people that he never even thought of or realized. So, well, when he gets word of that this isn't just like Haman coming after me, he is going after everybody. When he receives that word, when Mordecai, it says, this is Esther chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai learned that all that he had done, he tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And so Mordecai, if you will, just made a decision for himself. I am not going to bow down and worship Haman. I'm not going to bow down and worship any other foreign god. I only worship the one true living. And that's what he did for him. But it didn't, that decision that he made ended up not just affecting him, it affected every Jew in the region. Haman now wants to kill all of them, and he has now received permission from the king to do that. And so a day has been set, and letters have been sent out to every province that on this day, every Jew is fair game. They can be put to death. I don't think Mordecai could have ever imagined that one simple decision that he made to not bow down could have turned into this, that on this day, every one of my fellow people is going to be put to death because of what I did. I don't know, maybe he did think through all that and he knew that was coming. It's just hard to imagine that he can envision this one simple decision could have had such amazing ramifications. How many decisions do we make in a day? They tell us between 33 and 35,000 decisions we make every single day. Who gets affected by those decisions that we make? I would venture to guess for most of the decisions we make, we're pretty sure nobody else is affected by them. I get up in the morning, I open the pantry door, and there's Fruity Pebbles, and there's Captain Crunch, and something else, whatever. And I'm like, today I'm feeling Captain Crunchy. And so I pull that out and I eat it for breakfast. And to be honest with you, I make that decision and it doesn't affect anybody. Well, sort of affects a few people, because the people who make Captain Crunch, now they need to make more because I'll probably end up buying more. And the person who drives it from the factory to the store is probably glad because that's some job security for him. But okay, and then there's the farmer who grows the grain that becomes Captain Crunch, and so he's probably glad that I eat Captain Crunch. But it really is just a very simple decision that doesn't really affect anybody. And so when you think through decisions you make, sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, more people are affected by a simple decision I make than I actually would have realized. But that's, if you will, is kind of the point, if you will, that I'm trying to get at here. Is that decisions get made all the time, and we don't always know or are able to appreciate all that is going to be affected by that decision that we make. Mordecai is honoring God. He's not going to bow to Haman. He's obedient to God. He is making a decision. And I think for a lot of us, we feel like when I do in my life, when I make the decision to do what God has called me to do, when I say yes in obedience to God, I think our natural inclination is that everything is going to work out perfectly because that's how it should happen when we do things to honor God. But when Mordecai makes this decision to honor God, from his perspective, if you will, that is not what happens. It went south fast. Esther chapter 3. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not deal down or pay honor to him, he was enraged. We've looked at this. And yet, having learned that Mordecai's people he scorned the idea of only killing Mordecai. You see that decision that Mordecai made to honor God, he probably would have been okay if he'd have been the only, I mean, he wouldn't have liked it, but if he was the only one affected, okay, that's probably how it should be. But he isn't the only one who's going to be affected. He scorned the idea of only killing Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. A couple verses later, verse 13. Dispatchers were sent by the couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate the Jews. And listen to this. Young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, and to plunder all their goods. Again, Mordecai just makes a simple decision. I'm going to honor God. And when you make a decision to honor God, in our economy, that means everything should go perfectly. And yet Mordecai makes a decision to honor God. And from his perspective, that is not what happens. All of a sudden, this letter gets sent out in every language so everybody can read it to all 127 provinces. On this day, every Jew is fair game. Young, old, women, and infant, they all die. And everything in their house, all the plunder, all their goods, it's fair game for anything to have and to take and to use. And so all of a sudden you begin to appreciate why Mordecai, when he receives his copy of that letter and he sees what his decision leads to, I think I'd tear my clothes and put off the sackcloth and ashes and weep and wail and mourn and fast. Look at what my one decision has done to so many people. It is really hard to determine the effects, if you will, or the consequences of any one decision. To steal from contemporary culture, a decision is made to bomb Iraq. They're trying to get a nuclear weapon. People don't want that to happen. Some people probably do. But, they're like, we're going to kill all these people. We're going to kill all these people. So we don't want them to have it. And so we make a decision to bomb. Fine. What does that one decision, what are the consequences of that? How many people in Iraq died when those bombs dropped? I have no idea. I think the most recent number I had heard was there were 13 servicemen and women from America who have died in the conflict. I have no idea, what those things are like, are we going to do this or aren't we going to do it? Yeah, we're going to drop the bomb. What can we expect this is going to cost? What can we expect the number of casualties to be? How many people are going to be hurt? How many people are going to die? What's the number that's on that thing, the consequences of the decision? We don't anticipate anybody dying. We think it could be 10. We think it could be as high. Okay, but all that is a number. But for those 13 families who lost a loved one, it was a son, it was a grandma. Grandma and grandpa lost a grandchild. A child lost a mom, a child lost a dad. And when you begin to think about these things, all of a sudden consequences of decisions made, all of a sudden they begin to magnify. It seems like kind of a simple, hey, bomb them, let's not do that. But every decision you make goes way beyond, doesn't it? You make a decision to go out with the group and party. You make a decision to drink. And now all of a sudden it's time to go home. The bar is closing, party's winding down, and you're going to drive home. It's a decision you make. And the only person it affects is you, right? Not really. Every decision affects a lot of people in a lot of ways. You make a decision to cheat on your taxes. You make a decision to cheat on your spouse. But it's me and this person, whatever, nobody really gets affected. Talk to your kids when they find out. Talk to her kids when they find out. Talk to the spouses. Is there any effect in that? And all of a sudden, the decisions that we make carry all kinds of consequences. You go to church on Sunday, and somebody that you don't know, a visitor to your church, is sitting in your pew. They're sitting in your seat. And now you're kind of annoyed because you'll have to sit someplace else. And then the songs get sung and the preacher preaches a nice sermon and communion and prayer time or whatever your church does. And now it's time to get up and leave. You're going to be late for work if he keeps rambling on. Let's go, wrap it up. And you got to get out of there. You don't have time to say anything to the visitor who's visiting your church that day. And maybe they leave that church thinking, well, that's the unfriendliest church I've ever been to. Maybe you are running late, but you decide, I'm just going to introduce myself and say hi and glad you came. And you do that. Didn't mean much to you, but it was a decision that you made. And all of a sudden, from their perspective, they're like, wow, this is a nice, friendly church. Warm and inviting and welcoming. I think I'll come back next week. And God's working in the background, using and changing and altering things in ways that we never see or understand. Because, if you will, of decisions that we make, we'll make a right decision. We want to. But will making that decision always lead to a positive, right outcome? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. But when we watch this, and we'll look at it more next week, we're going to watch these decisions unfold. And here's my guess. From Mordecai's perspective, he makes the decision, I am not going to bow. I don't think he could have anticipated what was going to come. And now when this letter goes out to all these regions about that on this day, every Jew is fair game, I am assuming that he was mortified. And I think his reaction bears that out. He tears his clothes. What have I done to my people? And yet God is going to use that. He's going to work in the shadows in ways that we would have never dreamed or imagined for something glorious and amazing to occur. And God can do that for us too. He can take things, maybe we made a decision that we knew was not God-honoring. And yet God can even work in ways to turn that to good. God can take something that we did to honor him, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in trouble and despair. And God goes, in time, you will see what I can do if you will just trust me to work and move in the shadows in ways that you don't understand. Book of Ephesians, chapter 4. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and authorities, against powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. The Bible tries to tell us. We're pretty sure, we're seeing and understanding, and God says, there is a fight going on in the shadows that you don't understand, but I will prevail. Romans chapter 8. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We don't know what we ought to pray, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts and knows our mind, our spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things, God works for the good to those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. For those who God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called, and those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. Paul wants the Romans to understand God is always moving and working in the shadows. And his ultimate divine and perfect will be accomplished. Mordecai was distraught because of a decision he had made. What he couldn't know is that God was moving in the shadows to use even that for him to know an amazing victory. And maybe you're in a spot today where you don't know how any of this is going to work out. And yet I believe that God would want you to know he is moving and working in the shadows. He will work all things together for good to those who love him. Trust the God of the shadows.